Every time Jerome Powell talks about housing, it always seems like he's a little lost.
The housing part of it. Yeah. So
then he loves to point out the obvious in these conversations.
of course, housing is significantly affected by these higher rates.
But what does it all mean for us after they've raised the rate 75 basis points?
Which are really back where they were before the global financial crisis.
Well, we're going to talk about that and find out exactly what this means for us. Are we in big trouble with the housing market with this increase by the Fed? And is it going to be even more bad shape if they raise it up even more in December?
They're not historically high, but they're much higher than they've been.
There's always some confusion when the Fed comes out with these numbers with interest rates. People automatically think, well, that's what's going to happen to mortgage rates as well. The mortgage market doesn't necessarily get affected the same way as other markets, like your credit cards and your car. I just recently had a guest on my show, Ryan LaRussa with GMFS Lending, and he explains how this actually does affect mortgages currently today.
When the Feds raise the federal funding rate, that does impact mortgages, but just a little bit. I mean, matter of fact, like this past week, rates, we've been seeing 30-year money, upper sixes, right around 7%. And that's about where we still are. The bond market, which is how 30-year rates are derived, really, to be honest with you, like it when they increase the federal funding rate. They do not like it at the rate that he's increasing, Jerome Powell, the rate that he's increasing that.
Now, if I know my audience, well, I think I know my audience. I know you're not really too thrilled with these 7% interest rates. I'm not either. But not too long ago, CNN came out with an article stating the fact that they feel mortgage interest rates could go into the 5s next year.
But I do anticipate, and the guys that I follow, and we are under the assumption that yes, rates early next year are going to come back down.
This may be a perfect opportunity for some of you that have been sitting on the fence to wait for those 5% rates. Not only that, if you do wait it out, a lot of the sellers right now are running scared because they read the headlines just like you do. And they're more willing to work with home buyers than they were in the past year. A lot of them are giving a lot more incentives. Now, let's just think about it this way. If you are the same person that is extremely savvy looking at these 7% interest rates, you might be able to get a deal, especially if you're working with a panic seller. You might be able to work with your lender and the home seller itself to buy down your rate and get it into the 5s today. So then you wouldn't have to deal with the competition that could possibly be happening if the interest rates do go back down to 5, because there's going to be a lot more pent up demand if more people are getting into the market once those rates do go down to 5. You might be able to get them now instead of having to wait for another 6 to 7 months. Just something to think about strategy wise.
And you're seeing housing activity decline. You're seeing housing prices growing at a faster rate, and in some parts of the country declining.
The housing crash bros love to point out that, home prices are sinking into the toilet. That's what they keep saying. But I want to point out something to you that most people don't even think about is the fact that how many people, first of all, in order to get that loan in the past few years, had to go through a very stringent credit background check in order to get approved for a loan in the first place.
Housing credit was very much more carefully managed by the lenders.
This is not a repeat of 2008. These are people that have bought homes and were buying them in the last 2 years, were buying them overvalued. Don't get me wrong. They were paying way too much for it, but they were using that amount that they were buying over with cash. So even if they lost $100,000 that they bought the house for over the amount that it was listed for, they're not losing $100,000 in equity off their mortgage. They just lost it out of their bank. They gambled it.
So it's a very different situation and doesn't appear to present financial stability issues.
So even if they were going to sell, they'd still break even. But let's just put it this way. A lot of those people gained a lot of equity in those 2 years. Some of them gained 20 to 25% in their houses in over 2 years. It's going to take a long time for that equity to be completely drained out for them to either walk away breaking even or having to short sale.
Well, I think the equity position is definitely going to save a tremendous amount of folks. Again, just think about the simple math of what we just talked about. At 40 to 45% average equity position, even if your housing market went down, which there's going to be some, it's no secret, some markets, that's why I think you said it, knowing the local market that you're in is key, right? Because some markets are going to take a little bit more of a sting than others.
The housing market needs to get back into a balance between supply and demand. We're well aware of what's going on there.
Have you heard of something called the silver tsunami when it came to the housing market? That was something that they had said that was going to happen over the past 5 years. And it was stated that people that were going to retire were going to have all these homes that they needed to sell in like northern states so they could move down south. Well, that didn't really necessarily happen, but they're still talking about the silver tsunami. And that could very well be possible because a lot of the second home owners that happened over the last couple of years were baby boomers. They bought more second properties than any other time in history. And they kept on both of their houses, not only the one that they own, but another one either in a vacation spot or a second retirement spot. And that brings me to another point because everybody was talking about these large vacancy rates, especially through California.
According to the supervisor, the report shows that most of the homes sitting empty for 6 months or longer are vacation homes.
I will say this when it comes to vacant homes. Either A, they're the person that, like I mentioned earlier, is the one that's retiring and has a second home somewhere. B, they're using it for an Airbnb and they haven't quite gotten it on the market or the Airbnb market. C, they're holding on to it as something as a depreciating asset for their taxes. D, it's somebody who has their house up for rent, just regular long-term rental use, and they have their rents incredibly too high, which seems to be the case in a lot of places. And some of these landlords are just too stubborn to come down on their rent. Pretty soon they're going to have no choice but have to. Now in California, in that San Francisco area, they're talking about adding a tax that would charge people for having vacant homes. Now this is something they've done in some areas in Canada as well. With the shortage of supply of affordable homes, I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea, but I pass that question off to you. Do you think that if there's a number of affordable homes in the area that are sitting vacant, should the people that own it be punished by some kind of tax if they continue to keep it empty and don't use it for people to either rent or at least put it back up for sale? Should there be a penalty for them?
From a financial stability standpoint, we didn't see in this cycle the kinds of poor credit underwriting that we saw before the global financial crisis.
The concern I have with the lower rate environment, to be honest with you, is that the inventory, we all say it on every call or mastermind I'm a part of, there's very, very, very limited inventory at a affordable price.
Ryan shares my concern when it comes to affordable housing options and that there's a lack of them available on the market. Sure, we can hope that there's going to be a silver tsunami. Sure, we can hope that the Airbnb business tanks and it allows for more affordable homes to go on the market. Yes, we can even hope that the evil institutional investors start losing their shirts and start putting some of these houses back on the market. But the truth of the matter is we need home builders to build more affordable housing. So people have been asking me, should I buy a house now or should I wait until next year? My whole thing is I do not tell you what you should be doing with your money. You should always be speaking to a lender first to talk about your financial situation. I will say this, rent isn't going to get cheaper anytime soon. So should you buy a house right now? If you can find yourself a good deal and you can find the seller that will buy down your rate, that will give you incentives, and it's in a good location and it's less than your rent, it's something to definitely consider.
Every other deal is at 2-1 buy down to where the seller can we can use a seller closing cost to buy the rate down 2 percentage
Correct.
points. So if the rate's 7, we're getting on a 5. So is it really a rate issue? Not when you have less than 30 days or a month and a half of inventory.
And you have time now, especially in some of the markets that have a lot of new construction. But you know as well as I do, a lot of those new constructions are not for the first-time home buyer. Oh, another thing, if you happen to buy a house this year and it was at that 7.25, you might be wondering how long you have to wait before you refinance if the rates do go down in the 5s like they're predicting.
But there is no specific timeline you have to wait, but you definitely want to lower it at least 1 full percentage point, which I believe, based upon everything I'm following, you buy a house now, you're probably second quarter next year going to be in a fantastic opportunity to be able to refinance and get yourself a lower note.
If your home has gained in equity or at least remained the same value, it seems like, yes, you can go ahead and refinance. Now, the only caveat to that is if your mortgage has a prepayment penalty, you're going to have to check with your mortgage provider to make sure there isn't a prepayment penalty. Most mortgage companies aren't going to have that. That was a thing in the last housing crash that we had, and the amount of that prepayment penalty was steep, very steep. But most likely your mortgage isn't going to have that, but definitely check that ahead of time.
Man, I'm no crystal ball projector, but I can tell you what's not going to happen. It's not going to be back in an 08 or anything like that. the factors just don't align that way.
This has sure been the most interesting housing market that I've ever seen in the last 3 years. And I know I've been saying that for the last 2 years, but I'm telling you, next year is going to be just as much of a roller coaster. So let me know in the comment section below what you think is going to be happening to the housing market heading into 2023. To watch more videos about the Fed and the affordability crisis here in the United States, you're going to want to watch these videos right here. My name is Kristina Smallhorn, your real estate whisperer, and I tell you all this because good real estate information matters.